Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. Eleanor doted on her son David, considering him the main meaning and gift of her life. She also had a daughter, Clara, but their relationship remained cool. Clara grew up independent and self-sufficient. Her future didn't cause her mother much worry. David was another matter. Although he had achieved certain successes in life, his mother's perception of him was different. She was possessed by an unshakable conviction. If she were to relax her control and stop her overprotection, her son would become helpless and unable to survive without her support. Of course, this was a profound misconception, but trying to convince her otherwise was futile. All of David's attempts to free himself from his mother's influence crashed against a brick wall. Over time, he accepted his fate and learned to exist under conditions of total surveillance and hyperprotection. This, of course, sometimes constrained him, but David had learned in childhood. Arguing with his mother was pointless. Real difficulties in their relationship arose when David decided to start a family. His chosen one, Sarah, was already the third serious contender for the role of his wife. The two previous girls couldn't withstand the pressure from his caring mother and her all-encompassing control, preferring to break off the relationships. Sarah turned out to be a girl of rare patience. David had warned her in advance about the peculiarities of his mother's nature and cautioned that they would have to live under the same roof as Eleanor. But Sarah couldn't yet imagine how biting Eleanor's remarks could be and how much they could darken her life. The following Saturday was the first meeting with the future mother-in-law. Eleanor wasn't supposed to know that David had already proposed and received consent. Sarah was very nervous before this meeting. She understood perfectly well that her future with her beloved was at stake. Having asked David in advance about his mother's preferences and dislikes, Sarah mentally prepared herself, although her anxiety remained quite palpable. Sarah baked a honey cake, the potential mother-in-law's favorite treat, dressed up, and waited for David. He, grabbing a bouquet on the way, picked up Sarah, and they headed to his place. Eleanor was also preparing for the arrival of her future daughter-in-law. Even without seeing the girl, she was already skeptical. She had not the slightest doubt that she wouldn't like Sarah. Eleanor was convinced. No one and nothing could ever love and care for her son the way she did. Eleanor met the young couple in the hallway. She was dressed up with light makeup, giving the impression of a quite good-natured woman. However, Sarah physically sensed the negativity emanating from her. Probably for the first time in her life, she felt so clearly that she wasn't welcome here. But Sarah wasn't used to giving up prematurely and was ready to show resilience for the sake of her beloved. During dinner, Eleanor asked questions standard for such meetings, about family, housing, education, work. Sarah answered calmly and confidently. She had things to be proud of. She grew up in a good family, received a decent education and upbringing. Her father was a retired colonel, her mother a practicing surgeon. Sarah herself graduated from medical school and worked as a gastroenterologist in a private clinic. Eleanor was impressed by Sarah's story. David's previous girlfriends were much simpler and, frankly, weaker. One was a nail technician, the other a salesperson in a fashion store. Eleanor was impressed by Sarah's background, her education, and she might have even praised her if she hadn't been vying for the role of her son's wife. Overall, the dinner passed without major incident. David drove Sarah home and returned. He understood that a difficult conversation with his mother was coming, and it was unavoidable. His mother was waiting for him in the living room. It was clear from her expression that Sarah had somehow displeased her after all. David inwardly prepared to defend his fiancée. "Mom, what is it? Something's wrong again? What didn't you like about Sarah?" David decided to go on the offensive immediately. "What makes you think I didn't like her?" His mother pretended to be surprised. "A sweet girl, educated, cultured, pleasant to talk to, but," David continued. But there's always a but, isn't there? Yes, if it weren't for one but. I think she's boring, Eleanor said. It was hard to imagine a more ridiculous quibble. David even laughed. Mom, are you serious? Boring? Why did you decide that? I don't know, it just seemed that way. It was obvious that Eleanor simply couldn't find a more substantial reason for her displeasure. How will you live with her? Have you thought about that? I'll live perfectly well, Mom. Stop looking for a black cat in a dark room, especially if it's not there. Sarah is a very good girl, calm, well-mannered, cultured. Exactly the kind you always dreamed of for me, Mom. He walked up to his mother and took her hands. Listen, I'm 32. I want a family, children. How much longer should I keep choosing? Eleanor understood that her son was right, and it was high time for him to start his own family, but she so didn't want to share him with anyone, and even thoughts of future grandchildren didn't warm her heart. Besides her son, she essentially needed no one else. You're right, son. It's time for you to get married. It just seems to me that you're still a little boy who needs his mother and her care more than anything in the world. But you've grown up, and perhaps a mother is no longer needed. She launched into her usual song. Mommy, don't talk nonsense. I always need you, and will live with you. I'm not going anywhere. We'll still talk, have dinner together, go shopping, go to the dacha. It's just that one more person will appear in our house, and perhaps not just one over time. It'll be much more cheerful that way, and you won't be alone when I'm on business trips. David looked at his mother hopefully. Eleanor couldn't bear that look. She had never been able to refuse her favorite. All right, get married. I won't interfere. Mom, I knew you were the wisest woman in the world, he hugged and kissed his mother. 2 months later, Sarah and David became husband and wife, and the girl moved into her husband's house. The first few weeks went surprisingly smoothly. Sarah couldn't even believe that everything could be so good. Eleanor was welcoming and benevolent, chatted nicely with her daughter-in-law, and tried her best to help her in every way. But then David went away on a week-long business trip, and that's when it started. You're not ironing David's shirts right. You didn't put enough salt in the soup. You put too much salt in the porridge. You put the cups in the wrong place. You can't sit in this armchair. This is David's armchair. Everyone in our family knows that. Complaints poured down in an endless stream. Sarah didn't understand how the same person could change so much practically overnight, but she remained silent and endured, re-ironed shirts, rearranged cups, and corrected all her other mistakes. The real nightmare erupted when Sarah brought a kitten home. David had said that they always had cats. Sarah thought that the appearance of a fluffy creature might improve the situation, but she was mistaken. Sarah had cleared the purchase of the kitten with David, and her husband approved the idea. But Eleanor held a different opinion. Why did you drag this flea-bitten thing into the house? Do you know I'm allergic to cat hair? You're doing this just to spite me. And that's when Sarah couldn't take it anymore. My dear Mrs. Smith, what are you trying to achieve? Do you want Dave and me to get divorced? Well, that's not going to happen. We love each other. I cleared the kitten's arrival with your son, and he assured me that you always had cats and that you would surely like the idea. But it turns out you're ready to deny even that just because I brought the kitten. Sarah spoke calmly, but very confidently. The only thing you'll achieve with this attitude towards me is that we'll move out into a rented apartment, and you'll be left alone. Does that option suit you? I don't think so. So either we live peacefully, or we leave. You can forget about us breaking up. I'm expecting a baby. Eleanor looked at her daughter-in-law with completely different eyes. So you do have a character, girl, it turns out. Want to compete with me? Well, well, she thought. But she said something completely different aloud. I don't want you to leave. Maybe I am being a bit critical, but you must understand me. I'm a mother. I want my son to be happy. And do you think I appeared in his life to ruin it? Have I given the slightest reason to think that about me? No. Eleanor turned to leave, but then turned back to her daughter-in-law and said, "All right, let's try to live peacefully, especially since you shouldn't be getting upset right now." After this conversation, Eleanor indeed started behaving differently. She stopped picking on Sarah over trifles, tried to spend more time in her room, and crossed paths with her daughter-in-law less often. Sarah noticed how the kitten, whom she had named Jasper, often visited her mother-in-law's room, and she picked him up even more often than Sarah herself did. Life in the mother-in-law's house gradually improved. 2 years passed. Sarah and David had a son, whom they named after David's father, Edward. The father-in-law had been a policeman and died in the line of duty. Eleanor always spoke warmly about her husband, while David barely remembered his father. He was only 4 years old when he died. Eddie was growing up. His grandmother often played with her grandson, took him for walks while Sarah was busy with household chores. Eleanor's attitude towards her daughter-in-law hadn't changed. She still disliked her, but now she did so in silence. David worked a lot, often went on business trips. Their life flowed calmly and measuredly, but, as often happens, unforeseen circumstances burst into their quiet family harbor. David had to go to another country for a month. Sarah really didn't want him to leave, but there was no choice. It was a work necessity. A few days passed after her husband left. Sarah noticed that Eleanor was acting strangely. She was silent, not playing with her grandson. Gathering her courage, she decided to talk to her mother-in-law. "Mrs. Smith, is something bothering you?" Sarah asked uncertainly. "Maybe something hurts? Tell me, I'm a doctor." "Nothing hurts. Everything's fine," her mother-in-law replied calmly. But Sarah didn't believe her and decided to observe her behavior, and it wasn't in vain. The day after this conversation, Sarah accidentally overheard Eleanor talking to someone on the phone and asking for help. Sarah didn't understand exactly what it was about, but she clearly heard the words, "I need your support." Eleanor had many acquaintances and friends. She had relatives. She kept in touch with everyone, but she could only ask the closest ones for help. Sarah called David. "Dave, you need to talk to Mom urgently. Something's going on with her, and she's not telling me anything. I heard her talking to someone and asking for help, but I didn't understand what kind. You talk to her. Maybe something with her health? I can help, you know." "Okay, Sally, I'll definitely talk to her today. And generally, how are things with you?" "Oh, fine. It's just that your mom isn't herself. It worries me." "I understand. I'll call you tonight after I talk to her." In the evening, David called back and said that his mother had bad test results. The doctor at the district clinic said that urgent surgery was needed, and Mom was very scared. "Sally, try talking to her again. I asked Mom to at least show you the test results, and she seemed to agree. But show her care and attention, you know how she is. For my sake, please." "Dave, I'm worried about her myself. I'll do everything I can." She resolutely entered her mother-in-law's room. "Mrs. Smith, I understand that you don't think much of me and consider me a bad daughter-in-law, but please let me help you anyway." And then something happened that Sarah hadn't expected at all. Eleanor wept bitterly. Sarah even got scared. "Mrs. Smith, what's wrong? Is it that serious, cancer?" "No," her mother-in-law replied through tears. "It's just that I turned to my daughter. She doesn't have time to go to hospitals with me. But that's understandable. I always only focused on David. She has reason to resent me. My sister is also caught up in her own affairs and problems. My kith and best friend are at their dacha. They won't come to the city for my sake. They say, 'You have children.' And it turns out that no one cares about me. And I'm scared, you see. Very scared." "All right, let's calm down. You'll tell me everything in detail." Eleanor showed the test results and said that the doctor was insisting on surgery, saying they couldn't delay, time had been lost, and it was unknown how it would end. Sarah carefully studied the test results and then looked at her mother-in-law with surprise. "Which clinic were you at? Our District 1. I don't see anything serious, let alone irreparable, in your test results. I'll call my gynecologist right now, and we'll go for a consultation tomorrow. I'm sure it's some kind of mistake. Really? Her mother-in-law looked at Sarah hopefully. Really? The next day, Sarah and Eleanor went to a doctor she knew at the medical center where Sarah worked. The gynecologist listened to all the complaints, looked at the tests, and was extremely surprised by his colleague's conclusion about the need for urgent surgical intervention. Mrs. Smith, I assure you, you have no indications for surgery. I will prescribe you treatment, you'll complete the course, and everything will be fine. Eleanor wept again, this time from relief. Sal, can you go see that specialist yourself? Let her explain why she scared your mother-in-law like that. You shouldn't scare people like that, her colleague said. Don't worry, Andrew, I'll sort it out. When they left the center, Eleanor stopped, took Sarah's hand and said, Sally, please forgive me. I was very unhappy. I picked on you for no reason and every reason. I'm to blame towards you. She started crying again. And you turned out to be the only person who came to my aid. Because if I had gone to the doctor with someone else, I would have surely been sent for surgery. No one would have bothered to investigate. Thank you, my dear girl. Thank you so much. I promise you, I will be the most loving mother-in-law in the world. Sarah also cried. She hadn't expected such confessions and warm words from her mother-in-law at all. It's all right, Mrs. Smith. We are one family and should help and support each other. In life, it's often the opposite. Strangers support and help while your own are too busy, Eleanor remarked sadly. Well, then we're an exception to the rule, Sarah smiled. Let's go home. Eddie is waiting for us there with my mom. Suddenly, Eleanor stopped abruptly and looked at her daughter-in-law. Now you listen to me, and don't interrupt. I want to thank you, so that you see, not just in words, but in deeds, that I have changed. I will sign over my share of the apartment to you, so that you and David are always on equal footing. That will be fair. But, Sarah tried to object. All right, don't argue with me, her mother-in-law said playfully but strictly. On this matter, I will be categorical, strict, as a mother-in-law should be. She smiled and hugged her daughter-in-law tightly.